to Penjaros. The island of Penjaros was not initially a major port, nor the seat of the region's industrial revolution. Penjaros was a penal labor camp. People ranging from petty criminals and felons to political dissidents and labor organizers were sent to the island by the colonial government to do forced labor, producing goods to be shipped away to Europe. Following a prolonged series of strikes and violent uprisings in the mid-20th century, its status as a labor camp was abolished, and Penjaros became a city-state. People began moving to the island from the mainland, seeking work in the new factories that were being opened. But much like the mainland, it was not freed from colonialism. Rather than settling and ruling Penjaros themselves, the colonizers established a comprador government, composed of bureaucrats and politicians from the mainland, groomed by colonial wealth, who would rule favorably to foreign corporate power. Rather than independence, Penjaros rapidly gained the status of a point of export, the drain down which the nation's resources flowed without end. The people of Penjaros would not be free until the year 2058. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Emily, and this is my new series, Penjaros. Before I talk about the new series, I just want to do a channel update. Unfortunately, we won't be going back to Chenshu. I was very excited about that project, but I had a blue screen of death and had to reinstall Windows, and I had no backups for the save for Chenshu, so the entire project is lost. This new project will carry much of the same theme and ideas as Chenshu, but will present them in a much less optimistic fashion. I also want to briefly mention the new format I'll be using going forward. I'll no longer be recording time-lapse footage. I hate recording it, I hate editing it, so I'm not doing it anymore. My current format for Penjaros will consist of a story-based introduction and then a discussion about what I've built for the episode, using only cinematic footage. With that out of the way, let's finally talk about Penjaros. Penjaros is a former colonial prison/labor camp turned island metropolis. From the start, this was a place where resources and goods were brought from the mainland to be processed and sent off to Europe, to whichever power controlled the island at the time. Roughly from the 1600s through to the mid-2050s, it was always controlled and exploited in such a fashion. Its roots are in colonial industry, and the way the city looks and functions will reflect that. Penjaros will be extremely auto-oriented. There will be a metro system, a bus system, and a main railway connection to the mainland, as we've been seeing on screen. But the emphasis will always be the car and the truck. Anyone who wants to get anywhere quickly in Penjaros will drive there. Public transit will be the least pleasant option, though there will be no genuinely pleasant options. The main train station is hilariously downscaled for such a large city, a single intercity line and 2 metro connections. There's virtually nowhere to go from the main station. Passengers can disembark directly into some office buildings, a parking garage, some parking lots, or taxi stands below the station. There are shops under the station, but they're on the opposite side of a 6-lane road with no pedestrian crossings. A full 14 lanes of car traffic, 6 of which are an elevated freeway, cut directly through the station. This is not a place where you are intended to linger. Penjaros will have a cruel scarcity of public space. The purpose of the island after its colonial occupation was never to be pleasant for its inhabitants, only to produce and export goods. Despite being an island city, Penjaros will not have a waterfront. All of its shoreline will be artificial quays and docks, or sheer rock cliffs. The space adjacent to the water will be all but consumed by industrial and other non-pedestrian land uses. Warehouses, shipping facilities, fishing docks, rail yards, factories, empty lots, anything but public space. What few parks and plazas were built during the colonial era will be desperately overcrowded, much like the rest of the city, and they will be projects attached to official or public buildings, government and corporate offices, a hospital and university, a library system, schools, etc. Similarly, there will be a poverty of green space in the city. What little green space there is will follow the same pattern as everything else. Planters out in front of corporate offices and government buildings, on private property where you're expected to go in and spend money rather than stand outside and enjoy the palm trees. Or no man's land, the wasted space between freeway lanes where nothing useful can be built and no one wants to go. As you might have guessed, there will be virtually no concern for accessibility and walkability in Penjaros. The metro stations will be mostly accessed via stairways or the rare escalator. The blocks will be very large with limited pedestrian access through them, and the roads will be very wide with few pedestrian crossings. People with disabilities or other accessibility concerns, young children, the elderly, anyone who might benefit from accessibility and walkability will be left by the wayside. If you don't own a car, take a taxi. If you can't afford a taxi, get lost. Penjaros will be a very tall city. On a small island, space comes at a premium. Few people can afford to build anything low-rise, and fewer still can afford to live in anything low-rise, so everyone builds tall. Between the massive scale of the built environment and the total consumption of public space by advertisements, the domination of the freeways and the constant din of traffic, the pollution and the overcrowding, Penjaros is hell on earth. Penjaros will also be a highly segregated city. Here you can see two shacks, crammed in between the walls of the station and a parking garage. This will be a trend throughout the city. There will be rich districts with single-family houses on spacious lots, and there will be poor districts, vast tracts of slums, tenements, and massive high-rise projects. And there will be poorer housing still, like this. Shacks and tents, illicit housing squeezed into whatever corner a person can fit in. In city skylines, different types of discrimination can be hard to show. It's easiest to display a class-based segregation, by the quality and types of buildings you use, decals and props to make things look more grungy and less maintained, by the way you space things out. But colonialism typically brings with it a racial quality. The people who will be living in the hills, their views sheltered away from the squalor below, gated and fenced off with their lawns and pools and clean streets, will not be from the same place or look the same as the people living in shacks and high-rise tenements. The point of all of this is to convey the idea that colonialism is bad. It creates nightmarish conditions for the colonized, which persist well into the future, and it does so to the explicit benefit of another group of people. I want my content to reflect real-world issues and make people think about the world they live in. And despite the pessimistic start to this series, I do want it to eventually shift into an optimistic tone. Phase 1 of Penjaros will be the initial build, creating the city as it was just after the time of its liberation in 2058. Phase 2, if my computer survives that long and the city can still load, will be the post-liberation build. I'll make significant improvements to the city and progress the story as best I can. With all of that, I'll leave you with one last shot of the interchange and a night shot of the station. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.